Hello folks, it's Apocalypse6 back with another 4-color Loam video. Here I'm playing against Black-Red Reanimator, and the situation looks fairly grim. We kept a relatively weak hand based off of the strength of Chalice and Library, and it looks like we're not going to be able to disrupt our opponent this turn. And if their hand happens to be good enough, they could put something into play this turn. They're one Reanimate away from it right now. So they didn't have the Reanimate this turn. However, it doesn't take too long for a deck like this to find some way to reanimate that creature. They draw a Mox Diamond, so I have some chance to act. So the first thing I play is getting Daze, and I figure I might as well feed the Chalice to the Daze, thinking that, I can't Chalice on one this turn, and after this turn, my opponent will almost certainly not have 1-drops in their hand. I could, of course, turn off all future 1-drops, but that's probably not as good as getting actual answers of some kind. So I play out my library, intending to just keep drawing 3s or filtering until I find something that can interact. My opponent plays another looting, so they've seen 4 extra cards, and I'm thinking I basically have very little chance here. I mean, the best case scenario is they reanimate this white creature, which is only a 5/6, and then maybe I can beat it with a large knight or something. My opponent gives me one more turn, which I productively use by getting a Karakas into play and then a knight. The Karakas is largely not useful this game because my opponent has a target that is Karakas proof. However, that target is not strictly better than a knight in combat. There's a decent chance that I will outgrow it. And against decks like these, they're not going to get in for small amounts of damage, so it's perfectly reasonable to just draw a bunch of cards off of library and not get particularly punished for it. I mean, I might take 1 or 2 hits from this Chancellor. That's sort of the worst case scenario here. But the opponent is down fairly low in life as well, so there's some chance I can race it. So here I can play a Bob, which I guess is better in the late game. A Chalice, which might prevent further reanimation, and stops a flashback on those faithless lootings, or just another knight. And everything is going to be dazed. So if I were to take multiples, I can't play them all. I would need 6 mana to play both 2-drops. So instead what I do is I play my second knight, and basically I set up lethal if they attack. So my opponent doesn't attack, and here I get a Wasteland, mostly to grow the Knights, also as a side effect, reducing the number of options my opponent has. I actually don't get a Wasteland. I think about it and figure that I'm not going to be able to, it's not going to matter. Here I'm offered a Wasteland, but I'm also offered a Dark Depths, so I just play the Dark Depths, attack in, and threaten to make a Barret Lage, and as a consequence pump my Knights to lethal or somewhere in that vicinity. And then of course my opponent concedes. So here I want all the swords, I want Thalia for resource light draws on my opponents, and so I can catch up and wasteland them. So I have enough time to do things like wasteland them. And then of course ley lines. There's some consideration for deluges because they're basically 3 mana bad Source of Plowshares, but the first one is probably better than the worst card in my deck. So here I'm thinking about taking out Bobs because they're not answers. I mean, they do draw into answers, so they're not too bad. And I'm also considering cards that could be worse. Scavenging Ooze, I definitely want to keep it because it's Grave Hate, but Gaddock Teeg is not very important to the strategy. It stops like Unmask, but I don't care about that. And then I also take out a Loam, figuring that's better in the mid to late game, which by the mid game most things are decided in this matchup. There's a Leyline in my opening hand, so this is a keep. Even if my opponent does answer Leyline, it'll take him a couple of turns to do that, very likely, and by then I will probably have something else set up. And my opponent concedes, I guess because they didn't bring in answers to Leyline. Here I'm playing against another Reanimator player. I figured instead of uploading 2 more 7-minute videos or whatever, might as well lump these in. This is blue-black Reanimator, and I keep a not great hand. I mostly keep it because of Tranquil Thicket and Chalice. And the plan is just cycle and then Chalice them. And of course I don't know this is Reanimator, but this Karakas ends up being really good. My opponent Thoughtseizes themselves, revealing the ability to put one of these things into play on turn 1. And I guess see, I'm way more scared of the non-legendary one than the legendary one, but I guess maybe in a vacuum the other one's better. So there's this 4/5 in play, and I guess I'm just cycling here, and I'm relatively okay with the way things are right now. This is obviously a bad matchup, and given enough time, my opponent will do things that are very problematic for me. I have this Green Sun Zenith that can get a Deathrite Shaman or a Scavenging Ooze with enough time. So I figure, you know what, I'll just take 4 damage and play a Chalice on 1. That'll make it much harder for my opponent to do things to me. And then, next turn I can just bounce the creature. So here I'm doing exactly that. My opponent really hasn't done anything besides put the creature into play this game. There isn't a creature in their graveyard, so it's really not a ton going on. I attack, and I'm probably making a Scavenging Ooze here. I decided to go for a Knight. I guess I figure it might take more a decent amount of time to put something into the graveyard. Next turn, I can get a Scavenging Ooze and activate this way. And also, I can. If my opponent's at a fairly low life total, I might just kill him. Right, so I get the Scavenging Ooze to make sure that nothing happens next turn. I attack for 3 this turn, then I set up lethal next turn. My opponent complains that their no cantrip hand lost to my no cantrip hand. And swing in for lethal. Now the sideboarding is largely the same here, except for I also want to bring in chokes, because my opponent is playing islands, and if I get to Thalia them well enough, I can also play choke and have that be sort of backup disruption. And swords are less good against this deck because the black-red Reanimator plays a lot of sort of just dudes, whereas the blue-black deck plays cards like Grizzlebrand that you don't want to be swordsing. But like Chancellor of the Annex is, you're more than happy to swords that card. I can, again, board out Gaddock Teeg because it only really stops force. I should probably switch it for the Plow. But that's relatively minor. So here I don't have a late line, but it is a pretty good hand with turn 1 Chalice on 1, followed by Thalia, followed by Dark Confidant. I can easily see a hand like this being good enough to stop average hands from my opponent. I've been, of course, way better on the play, but it's also fine on the draw. My opponent has to mulligan pretty far, down to 5 is that I can't really see, but that also helps me a bunch. And passing with no play is an obvious indication of weakness. So my opponent has some chance to maybe go to 8, discard down to hand size, and then play like land, Lotus Petal, Exhume. That's sort of the best case scenario. But with this Thalia, that gets a lot harder. And here I'm a little bit indecisive about how to go about this, and my opponent just decides that the rest of the game is not worth playing and quits. So that's Reanimator, I guess. See you next time.